For centuries, people have been drawn to the strange and the extraordinary, especially when it comes to human beings. The circus became the stage where crowds could marvel at these oddities up close, though often at a painful cost for the performers themselves. In this video, we revisit 15 people who were branded as freaks by the circus because of their rare appearances or weird abilities. History may have tried to bury their stories, but here we bring them back into the light. And believe me, every so-called circus freak is just as captivating as the life they led. Number 15. The Iron King. Sigmund Breitbart grew up in Łódź, Poland, in a blacksmith's family where iron and muscle were part of everyday life. From that fire, he built a stage career unlike any other. He tore horseshoes in half, snapped heavy chains apart, and bent thick iron bars as if they were toys. He even let other strong men slam stones across his chest with sledgehammers. Crowds watched in disbelief as cars and even elephants balanced on his body, or wagons full of people were pulled along with nothing but his teeth. He wasn't just a freak. He was an entrepreneur, too. He wrote books, sold a bodybuilding course, and starred in the Austrian film The Iron King in 1923. But in 1925, one stunt ended it all. Driving an iron spike through wood, he struck his leg. Infection spread. Both legs were amputated, but doctors couldn't save him. 8 weeks later, the Iron King was gone, only 42. Werner Herzog later paid tribute in his film Invincible. Number 14. The Legacy of Lyle Tuttle. Lyle could easily have exhibited himself in a circus, but he did not. He was a guy who made many sideshow artists possible. Born in 1931, raised in California after his family moved west from Iowa, he became fascinated with tattoos as a boy. At 14, he took a trip to San Francisco and got his first one, a simple mother heart on his arm. For him, tattoos weren't decoration. They were proof of adventure, like stamps on a passport. By the 1950s, Tuttle owned his own shop in San Francisco, just as the city became a haven for rebels and dreamers. His clients included Janis Joplin, Peter Fonda, and the Allman Brothers. Annie Leibovitz photographed him for Rolling Stone in 1970, and he explained tattoos on Dick Cavett's show. He later opened a tattoo museum to preserve the art's history. When he died in 2019, countless artists and fans remembered him as the man who turned tattoos into a language of identity. It was a real loss. Number 13. The expansive Ida Williams. Ida Williams was born in Columbus, Ohio, sometime in the 1860s, and grew into the role that promoters bluntly billed as a fat lady. At her largest, she reportedly weighed around 566 pounds, though circus posters almost always exaggerated such numbers. By the 1880s, she was performing steadily, appearing with Sells Brothers, Ringling Brothers, Great Wallace, and across the dime museum circuit. She was a fixture of the Bowery's shows in New York, where crowds packed in to gawk. Yet Ida wasn't just a statistic on a poster. She was a working woman who found a way to turn her unusual size into a livelihood during a time when choices were scarce. She endured the stares, the laughs, and the insults, but also enjoyed the freedom to travel, earn money, and build a career on her own terms. Her story fades after the early 1900s, but Ida Williams remains one of countless women whose humanity outlived the cruel spectacle. Number 12. Princess Nelly and Major Stanley Jober. Stanley Jober from Poland stood between 36 and 46 inches tall. He became known as Major Stanley and eventually found both a partner and a stage partner in Nelly Francis Way, born in 1884 and billed as Princess Nelly. Just 30 inches tall, she was also a talented violinist and skilled seamstress, lending their act both charm and refinement. The couple performed with Otis Smith's Circus and the mighty Doris Cole. Francis Ferrari Show, traveling across America. They lived on the road in a specially customized truck designed for their size, When the Depression hit in the 1930s, they retired to Waterford, Connecticut, where they moved into a specially built miniature house, 10 feet by 30 feet, that perfectly suited their stature. Nelly passed away in 1941 and Stanley in 1958. Their story is remembered as one of resilience, love, and artistry. A life lived fully in miniature scale, but with a spirit that filled every room they entered. Number 11. General Willis Carver and his mother. Willis Carver's circus career began when he was just a boy. He was a little person who stood just waist-high, while his mom performed as a fat lady. Together, they became a mom and son act that audiences adored, promoted under the name General Willis Carver and Madame Carver. The contrast between them made posters sell, but on the road, they were simply family, earning a living together. They toured with Dan Rice, Sells Brothers, and Pullman and Hamilton, and filled dime museums like Cole and Middleton's in Chicago or Morris and Hickman's in New York. Willis, dressed in military costumes, entertained crowds, while his mother's immense figure drew its own fascination. Willis's life was short. He died in 1898 at only 30 years old. His mother outlived him, remembered through stories of their double act. Their bond reflected both the cruelty and closeness of the circus. Difference became spectacle, but family carried them through. Number 10. Henrietta Morates. Henrietta Morates was born in Berlin in 1866 and stood just 26 inches tall and weighed barely 36 pounds. She became famous as the German midget, though friends simply called her Hattie. Unlike most portraits of little people, one haunting image survives of her face alone. It's a headshot, not a full-length pose, and it forces you to see her not as a curiosity, but as a woman. In her 20s, she came to America, where she worked in dime museums and, according to some sources, Barnum's Circus. Dozens of photographs survive, showing her in fine dresses and costumes. Those images helped fuel her career, but also froze her in time, remembered for size rather than self. Her death date isn't recorded, but it likely occurred in the early 1900s. Still, that headshot remains unforgettable. Hattie's story reminds us that behind every circus label was a real person, with humor, dignity, and a life far richer than the posters ever showed. Number 9. African Dwarf Tommy. Thomas Dilward's story is as remarkable as it is overlooked. Born in 1840, he stood just 2 to 3 feet tall. But what set him apart wasn't only his stature, it was the color line he crossed. At a time when minstrel shows were performed by white men in blackface, Dilward, a black little person, was invited to perform. He sang, danced, and clowned, debuting in 1853 with George Christie's troupe. Over his career, he was billed as African Dwarf Tommy, the African Tom Thumb, and even Japanese Tommy, labels that helped him navigate a world not ready to see him as simply himself. He later performed with Bryant's Minstrels, Wood's, Kelly and Leon's, and Morris Brothers troupes. Even more fascinating, Dilward is credited in Bartlett's Book of Americanisms with coining the slang hunky-dory, meaning everything's fine. He died in 1887, but his legacy, crossing boundaries of race, size, and culture, marks him as not a freak, but a legend. Number 8. Colonel and Mrs. Ruben Steer. Ruben Allen Steer, aka Colonel, stood just 44 inches tall as an adult, weighing only 43 pounds. Despite his size, he carried himself with pride and confidence, performing with Stone and Murray's Circus, Carl Stephen Bailey's Circus, and the Lilliputian Opera Company. In 1880, he married Rebecca Ann Myers, a little person from Indiana, and the two toured together for decades. Their marriage was both a personal bond and a professional partnership, making them beloved performers wherever they traveled. By 1906, they retired to Cheapshay, Rhode Island, where they ran a poultry farm, restaurant, and candy shop. Ruben even worked as a local truant officer, where townsfolk swore he was a holy terror to mischievous kids. He died in 1915, leaving behind the memory of a man who lived far larger than his size. Colonel and Rebecca Steer's story shows how love and livelihood could thrive even in the circus world. Number 7. Count Philippe Nicole. Philippe Nicole was born in Montreal in 1881, and he began performing at just 12, joining Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey's sideshows. By 15, he'd already made his mark, and in 1906, he met Rose Dufresne, another little person. They married 7 years later, and with the savings from their performing careers, they created something unique, the Midget Palace. Opened in Montreal, it was a tourist sensation. Billed as the Count and Countess Nicole, the king and queen of all midgets, they invited visitors into a home where every feature was scaled to their size. The palace became one of Montreal's best-known attractions and made Philippe a wealthy man. Yet that fortune didn't extend far. His son, Philippe Jr., also a little person, made headlines not for show business, but for robbing a tobacco store in 1951. After Nicole's death in 1940, the palace was later taken over by an employee, lasting until 1990. Number 6. Edmund Ansley. William Edmund, born in 1891, was just 42 inches tall. Though many men of his stature were drawn into circus life, Ansley found another stage. At 19, he was hired by the Brown Shoe Company to be the mascot for their Buster Brown line. Dressed in a wig, short pants, and patent leather shoes, he toured the country for nearly 3 decades, charming audiences and promoting the brand. Billed as the smallest man in the world, a claim others also made, Ansley logged nearly 50,000 miles a year, appearing in towns coast to coast. For 28 years, his image as the comic strip character became familiar to countless Americans. His professional career never revolved around the sideshow, but his role blurred the line between marketing, entertainment, and circus tradition. He died in 1972, and his grave marker in Cook County, Texas, still testifies to the life he built. Small in height, Edmund Ansley's cultural footprint was anything but. Number 5. The Mammoth Lady. Susan Barton stood still long enough in 1849 for a Currier and Ives artist to sketch her, and that one moment preserved her name. Soon after, she joined P.T. Barnum's American Museum and became known as the Mammoth Lady. That title, not her real story, is what stuck. They claimed she weighed 579 pounds, with a waist of 7 feet around. Whether those numbers were real didn't matter. The public believed them. People didn't come to hear Susan speak. They came to gawk, and no journals, letters, or quotes from her survive. Did she love the attention, or did it haunt her? No one asked, and now no one knows. That's the cruelty of the freak show. People become weight totals and nicknames, not individuals. Susan lived, breathed, laughed, and maybe cried. She had a life before and after that sketch, but it's lost to the crowds who only saw Mammoth. All she wanted might have been to be seen, but she never really was. Number 4. Jack Dracula, the Marked Man. Jack, or Martin Semnak from Brooklyn, lived his life under the ink. He got his first tattoo at Coney Island in 1954, and within that same year had nearly 30 more. By the end, more than 400 tattoos covered his body, his arms, chest, even his face. With such devotion, it was only natural that he turned pro. He spent his career in sideshows across the country, from Dave Rosen's Wonderland in Coney Island to Hubert's Museum, Palisades Park, and the mighty Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus. He became a fixture of American tattoo culture, even showing up in the strangest places. In Matt Cimber's cult film, The Witch Who Came from the Sea, a seaside tattoo artist named after him appears, played by comedian Stan Ross. Locals in New London, Connecticut, also remembered him performing there when it was still a rowdy sailors' town. By 2011, he'd been inducted into the Sideshow Hall of Fame, a marked man forever. Number 3. Jolly Ema. Jolly survives only through postcards and whispers, a relic from a time when the public paid to see human size itself as spectacle. Her exact story is largely unknown, but one card lists her weight at 620 pounds. Whether accurate or exaggerated hardly mattered. The stage name said it all. Jolly Ema, larger than life. What the images do show is a patriotic lady, posed with flags and smiles, playing her role as the sideshow's happy fat lady. The irony is striking. In the mid-19th century, such bodies were ticketed curiosities. By today, they're commonplace in shopping malls or city streets. For Ema, the attention was her livelihood. I like to imagine her at a sideshow picnic, plate piled high with barbecue, laughing louder than anyone else. Maybe she hated the gawking. Maybe she enjoyed the stage. We'll never really know. What remains is her image. Number 2. The Snow Twins. Jenny Lee and Elvira Snow weren't really twins, but audiences never knew the difference. Born in Georgia, both had microcephaly, a condition that gave them small heads and limited mental capacity. Sideshow promoters billed them under many names: Pip and Zip, Pip and Flip, Peepo and Zippo, even claiming they were from the Yucatan to add exotic flair. In truth, their lives were less glamorous. Essentially rented out by their families, they spent most of their careers on display at Coney Island's World Circus sideshow during the late 1920s and into the Depression. Their mental state was said to be like toddlers, meaning they needed constant care, but promoters turned that vulnerability into a show. Hollywood gave them a strange kind of immortality. They appeared in Todd Browning's cult classic Freaks, 1932, alongside Schlitzie. Jenny Lee died just 2 years later in 1934. Elvira lived on quietly until 1976. Both remain remembered, not for who they were, but for what the world called them. Now, let's move to Number 1. Fleming W. Ackerman. Fleming W. Ackerman, born in 1863 in Moravia, New York, was first known as a gifted musician before the stage knew him as Colonel Speck. As a boy, he grew normally until age 4, when his growth slowed. He would reach only 4 feet 4 inches in height, but his talents stretched further. By age 8, he was singing and performing in amateur theatricals. By 1875, he was working professionally, touring with the Tremaine brothers, and soon attracting the notice of P.T. Barnum. His parents declined Barnum's offer. He was still only 13. Ackerman studied at a New York music conservatory, befriending Tom Thumb, Lavinia Warren, and the famous Lilliputian troupe. He toured with the Lilliputian Opera Company until scandal and bad management stranded them. Overwork soon ruined his voice, forcing him to retire from performance. He returned to Moravia, where he built businesses, a photo studio, bus line, and telephone exchange. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you soon.